It's the Rōnin BeatMaker. And welcome to Lounge Rōnin. All things, everything. And before we get into it, please, oh please, oh please, oh pretty please, make sure if you're new to the channel or if you're a regular, to hit that like button. And make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. And I apologize, as I was supposed to get on earlier today, but I had to take care of some family matters. But on this episode, we're going to discuss the lost kingdom of Shambhala. Now, this just happened to just kind of stumble onto my timeline. And I found this story pretty interesting. And I wanted to kind of share with you guys and see what you guys feel about it. And before we get into it, I got to let my mouse charge a little bit. But, there's some really interesting things in this article. But what I just want to say real quick in general is the notion of these lost kingdoms and civilizations that are riddled throughout our entire world. So much so that oftentimes we have the mainstream narrative doing whatever they can to suppress such knowledge of ancient kingdoms and civilizations, many of which would, in many ways, completely rewrite the mainstream narrative of what is true about our history. And I feel that for many of us out there, when it comes to the idea of lost kingdoms and civilizations, it tends to sound very fantastical and out of the ordinary. But I'll give you one example, and that would be the Battle of Troy, which many scholars deemed to not be a true story, that it never happened. And then eventually, archaeologists actually discover the remains of the Wall of Troy. And so I bring that up as one clear example of a myth made reality. And if you've caught my previous live stream about ancient mythology and time machines, there's a quote that I love. It's from Star Wars. And it pretty much goes, there is always a bit of truth in legends. And I think that is something that we can apply to our own reality, to our own stories of society and kingdoms and civilizations and lost technology, that there always is a bit of truth to those myths and stories and even folklore. Yeah, and I know it's we're living in a time now where, you know, some people say we're living in, you know, a constant ongoing episode or newspaper article from the Onion or the Babylon Bee. I mean, it's kind of crazy how so many things are being made manifest. And whether that is from a collective, whether that's, the whole concept of meme magic, um, or the idea of now that there are more, due to the internet, due to cameras and phones, more things are able to be revealed and known to us. You have more and more people out there presenting information, presenting stories and data, or even looking into said myths and legends. And, they dig just enough and they actually end up finding out that some of this stuff ends up being more real, if not true. So I feel that's just something that we all should, keep in mind when we engage in these ideas of legends and the implications of these stories. And yeah, I know I may be sounding foolish, but it, like I said, in regards uh, to the story of the Battle of Troy and how they found the wall, it's to me that, like, more, the more and more digging they do, the more and more we realize biblical stories from any text is tends to be more accurate than uh, fantasy. And that is also part of the reason why I feel that you have also this ongoing push to suppress and destroy such knowledge, because, like I said before, it just conflicts with the narrative. And as you know, they can't have anything conflict with the narrative, because then that would expose the lie and potentially allow us as individuals and as a collective to actually fully utilize our capabilities and the knowledge that's being held from us. So without further ado, let's get into this. All right, this was updated on January 31st, 2023 by Joanna Gillen. What is Shambhala? Understanding the mysterious kingdom of Shambhala. Shambhala, which is a Sanskrit word meaning place of peace or place of silence, is a mythical paradise spoken of in ancient texts, including in the Kalachakra, Tantra, and the ancient scriptures of the Zhangzhung culture, which predated Tibetan Buddhism in Western Tibet. I'm gonna have to look more into that. According to legend, it is a land where only the pure of heart can live, meaning those who have achieved enlightenment. According to the mythical Buddhist kingdom of Shambhala is a place where love and wisdom reigns, and where people are immune to suffering, want, or old age. Answering the question, what is Shambhala? Uh, is no easy feat. Shambhala is said to be the land of 1,000 names. It has been called the Forbidden Land, the land of the white waters, and land of radiant spirits, and land of living fire. Land of living gods, and even the land of wonders. The Hindus call it Arivartha, meaning the land of the worthy ones. The Chinese know it as Hiestian, the western paradise of Hiswangmu, and the Russian Old Believers, it is known as Belovodye. But throughout Asia, it is best known by its Sanskrit name, Shambhala, Shambhala, or Shangri-La. Interesting. So I guess we could say that, Shangri-La is, it's funny. I was kind of thinking about it too when I was first reading, skimming over this a little bit, and and prepping for this, I was like, is this like Shangri-La or something? Because it just reminded me of Shangri-La. I just didn't realize that this is actually the original name for Shangri-La, but it's mostly known even in the Western world, and I guess you could say in modern um, lingo, it's Shangri-La, but it really is Shambhala. That's really interesting. Just something I just kind of realized. Here we have a picture of Shambhala is described as the land of paradise, believed by some to be hidden within the Himalayan mountains. Interesting. Okay. The legend of the mythical land of Shambhala. The legend of Shambhala is said to date back thousands of years, and a reference to the mythical land can be found in various ancient texts. The bone scriptures speak of a closely related and called Ul Ulmolongring. Hindu texts such as Vishnu Purana mention Shambhala as the birthplace of Kalki, the final incarnation of Vishnu, who believers claim will usher in a new golden age. The Buddhist myth of Shambhala is an adaptation of the earlier Hindu myth. And let's learn more about this earlier adaptation of the Hindu myth. All right. Saraswati. Oh, hold on. This was updated April 14th, 2020, and it was written by Riley Winters. Saraswati, Hindu goddess of wisdom and protector of the universe. A deity with as many attributes as arms, Saraswati or Sarasvati is a Hindu goddess of aesthetics. This includes music, the arts, wisdom, and learning. She can be compared in many ways to the Greek god Apollo, combined with the mental prowess of the Greek goddess Athena. She is wed to Brahman, the highest deity of the Hindu religion, and complements his abstraction of the universe with her active efforts to seek and maintain the wisdom to protect it. But what exactly is her position in the Hindu hierarchy? Okay. The two Hindu trinities. Saraswati is part of one of the two primary trinities in Hindu culture. The first and better known is that of Brahm, Vishnu, and Shiva, who together keep the cosmos in order. In the Hindu tradition, Brahma is responsible for creating the universe. Vishnu ensures the universe is maintained and ordered, while Shiva is tasked with destroying the universe at an allotted time and reviving it accordingly. Saraswati is part of a second trinity. Together with Lakshmi and Parvati, Lakshmi is the wife of Vishnu and associated with wealth and prosperity. Parvati is the goddess of love and fertility. With the wisdom and artistry of Saraswati, these three women aid in the maintenance of the cosmos alongside their male counterparts. Interestingly, there are some customs that portray Saraswati as a wife of Vishnu, possibly because Vishnu is more actively worshipped in Brahm, and suggest she was later given to Brahm as a gift. A pure seeker of knowledge. In art, Saraswati is associated with the white lotus flower, as it symbolizes the knowledge which she is constantly seeking. She is often also associated with the swan or Hamsa to identify with her pure, innocent nature. It is believed wisdom is best achieved through indiscriminate means. She is portrayed in yellow or white, and her primary festival, Saraswati Puja, is celebrated on the first day of spring. And here we have a picture of a white lotus. It is likely that young children are taught the alphabet and preliminary learning skills during the Saraswati Puja due to her pure nature and intellectual prowess. Saraswati's spring association is probably intended to represent the ever-changing progression of nature alongside the development of children and their knowledge. In other mythical literature regarding Saraswati, she is said to provide gifts of education and learning to other gods. For example, she provides Ganesha, Ganesh, Ganesh, the elephant companion of Shiva, with pen and ink. And here we have a painting of the goddess of Saraswati by Raja Ravi Raman, 1896. The goddess of Saraswati and water worship. It was common to worship Saraswati in modern-day river Saruti, once named the Saraswati River, just like the well-known Ganges River. The Saraswati has long been thought to possess otherworldly powers. Bathing in it was believed to bring the worshipper good fortune and fertility. Whether Saraswati was a goddess prior to the naming of the river, or the river was personified into a goddess after years of worship there, is uncertain. However, there is an agreement among scholars that this is a site associated with the goddess Saraswati. Saraswati's name is first found in the Rigveda, one of the 4 sacred texts of the Hindu religion. It dates back around 1700 to 1100 BC, indicating that Saraswati has been a permanent part of the evolving faith. A chapter of the Mahabharata, a Hindu epic, even claims that Saraswati herself was responsible for the creation of the Rigveda and its 3 counterparts, the Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvaveda. This is a sensible presumption based on Saraswati's various aspects of wisdom and limitless knowledge of the universe. And here we have another beautiful painting of Saraswati, celebrating the goddess Saraswati. Vasant Pachami is a holiday linked to the goddess Saraswati and is celebrated across India to mark the end of winter and the beginning of spring. It is annually held in January or February. Worshippers wear yellow clothes on this day, and farmers celebrate the time when their crops turn yellow and the mustard flowers appear. Hindus give offerings of food to the goddess at her temples, and children place their books and sanctuary items in front of the statues of the goddess on altars in their homes to receive her help in acquiring wisdom. Yellow foods, flowers, and treats are also gifted between family, friends, and neighbors. Schools also encourage children to say prayers to honor the goddess during this celebration. Saraswati is also known in other names, each epithet indicative of the primary aspect of her person the worshipper wants to invoke. Some of these names are Bharati, Sharupa, and Vak, eloquence, existence, and speech, respectively. It should also be noted that Saraswati has roles in other Asian religions, particularly Jainism and Buddhism. Her roles in these faiths are slightly different, though she remains predominantly a goddess of knowledge. Now, that was good. Granted, it did not provide us any information, but that was still some cool little nugget of information. But I guess what I could take from that is the correlation between um, her and how should I put this? And spring. So my speculation would probably be is that um, perhaps at one point she was a goddess that resided in this mysterious kingdom. But I was hoping that that article would have actually provided us with a little more oomph. But regardless of that, I did find that actually rather interesting. But alas, we learned some new stuff. Nothing wrong with that. And honestly, here sometimes, when I do these presentations, not every, we might get onto some another article or something, and it might not necessarily expand on the main topic, but it might just provide us a little bit of nugget of information and just expand our own knowledge. But I find it what's cool about it, and I probably should look more into the the Buddhist interpretation of this um myth. You know what? Let me take a quick look. Pretty sure I do not have the article up. What? Okay, you know what? Let me go to history. Let me look this up real quick. Um, okay, no. You know what? We're good. We're on the right path. So we're fine. All right, let's get back onto the main article. Now we learned a little bit of Saraswati. Sounds like a nice lady. But let's keep on going. However, in the text in which Shambhala is discussed extensively is the Kala Chakra. The Kala Chakra refers to a complex and advanced esoteric teaching and practice in Tibetan Buddhism. Shakyamuni Buddha is said to have taught the Kala Chakra on request of King Suchandra of Shambhala. As with many concepts in the Kala Chakra, the idea of Shambhala is said to have outer, inner, and alternative meanings. This makes it complicated for the uninitiated to truly understand what Shambhala really is. The outer meaning understands Shambhala to exist as a physical place, although only individuals with the appropriate karma can reach it and experience it as such. The inner and alternative meaning refers to the subtler understanding of what Shambhala represents in terms of one's own body and mind. I think I know where they're going. And during meditative practice, these two types of symbolic explanations are generally passed on orally from teacher to student. Now, I'm wondering if what they're saying is that, in many ways, Shambhala is a physical place, but it's also a um, esoteric place. It is a place beyond our realm, beyond this plane of reality and existence. And it is possible to, I guess you could say, tap into and be present into the physical realm of Shambhala. But to truly experience it in its totality you would need to become enlightened to a point where you're able to transcend the physical plane of Shambhala into its the true ethereal world uh, that is incomprehensible and infinite compared to the physical plane of this kingdom. That's how I interpret it. As the 14th Dalai Lama noted during the 1985 Kalachakra initiation and Bodhgaya, Shambhala is not an ordinary country. Quote, although those with specific affiliations may actually be able to go there through their karmic connection, nevertheless, it is not a physical place that we can actually find. We can only say that it is a pure land in the human realm. And unless one has the merit and the actual karmic association, one cannot actually arrive there. Now here we have a Buddhist, this is a picture of a Buddhist description of Shambhala from the Sera Monastery in Tibet. It's beautiful. Here, and I just noticed the correlation between quantum physics and Shambhala, because it's for my podcast listeners. You're not gonna I can't actually. This is a geometrical design, a very, very intricate geometrical design. And if you saw my live stream where I was discussing Hindu texts and quantum physics, I'm starting to get the impression that, Shambhala is of a quantum realm in the sense. It's a quantum reality. And I know, the Buddha is saying, he says it's a land in the human realm. And in my mind, he's saying it as it's a physical place. But I think and this is just my interpretation, but I think what he means is that it is a physical place in the human realm. Uh, but I'm wondering if that in order to go there, I don't know if it's if it's in the human realm, but you can't physically travel there, but you can astral project yourself to Shambhala. That's just something I'm kind of wondering because was it? I think it was in my ancient mythology on time travel. I talked about the sequel to the Dark Crystal, the the show that was unfortunately canceled on Netflix. I'm sorry to say that, but if you check it out, it's really good. But it had the I can't remember her name, the shaman witch, and she wakes up after being asleep for 100 years, but she was traveling the universe, going to different planets, going to different realities. So I'm wondering if Shambhala is in our physical human realm that we can physically traverse and experience. Whether or not that means, whether or not it's like, as I was saying earlier, in some kind of pocket quantum realm, I'm under the impression that maybe it is, because if we're gonna connect to quantum physics with it, perhaps there's some kind of quantum physicality with our human mind that is able to unlock the ability to go to this kingdom. I mean, I'm reaching here, but I think some of you guys kind of get where I'm going with it. The prophecy of Shambhala. The concept of Shambhala plays an important role in Tibetan religious teachings. Oh, I just want to check something real quick. Apologies. Okay, we're good. The concept of Shambhala plays an important role in Tibetan religious teachings. and has particular relevance in Tibetan mythology about the future. The Kala Chakra prophesies the gradual deterioration of mankind as the ideology of materialism spreads over the earth. I would say that we're literally living in that time right now. Materialism is has become humanity's um spirit animal, so to speak. I mean, whether it's you look at Instagram, you look at TikTok, these are digital things, but they are materialistic in the guise of having being in our phones. And I bring those two things up specifically because they are things that people obsess over, and they use those things to gain more material wealth and social what's the word I'm looking for? Social standing, material social standing. It's right there for you. And yeah, we are living in that. We are living in the deterioration of mankind. The ideology of materialism is so prevalent that even the corporate military pharmaceutical oligarch industrial complex use it to their advantage, and they've used it to docile and pretty much what's the word I'm looking for, sterilize humanity into actually seeing past the materialism and embracing its spirituality, embracing God, and embracing being the best version of themselves. There is none of that in materialism, and you're seeing that right now. And I'm wondering if this is kind of very similar to, a new kingdom will arise on earth and peace and harmony, very similar to biblical texts and Christianity. Something to think about. When the barbarians who follow this ideology are united under an evil king and think there is nothing left to conquer, the mist will lift to reveal the snowy mountains of Shambhala. The barbarians will attack Shambhala with a huge army equipped with terrible weapons. Then the king of Shambhala will emerge from the Shambhala with a huge army to vanquish the so-called dark forces and usher in a worldwide golden age. Though the Kala Chakra prophesies a future war, this appears in conflict with the vows of Buddhist teachings that prohibit violence. This has led some theologians to interpret the war symbolically. The Kala Chakra is not advocating violence against people, but refers to the inner battle of religious practitioner against demonic tendencies. And what was I saying earlier? Disassociating us from God. And that's the whole thing with the transhumanistic agenda. And I'm not talking about the alphabet community. I'm talking about the WEF, Vanguard, BlackRock, Elon, um, CBDC, the central bank digital currency, all of that stuff. The wanting to put microchips in our body, and unfortunately I would have to put this as well in there, the unfortunate grooming that is going on in the alphabet community. We have that stuff going on, the normalization of very immoral, unethical behavior and practices towards adults, but more primarily focused on children. And these are the things that I think that uh, the Kala Chakra is referring to in terms of a spiritual war. And we are literally in a spiritual war. We are literally fighting a war for our very souls. That is what's going on right now. Let me give me one moment, guys. I'll be right back. I am back. Apologies for the brief delay. I was that was my mom. Had to call and check in on her for, well, she was calling to check in, and I had to check back in. So I apologize for the brief delay, but we're back. And here we are. Now we were talking about the spiritual warfare because as we were looking at the Kala Chakra prophecy of a future war, and the Buddhist teachings, they prohibit violence, and theologians are interpreting this as being more as a spiritual warfare. Now, saying how we have these many agendas that are being implemented, and unfortunately many organizations are being co-opted by these agendas, and these agendas are being used to disconnect us spiritually, disconnect us from our humanity. And that is what you're seeing going on right now in regards to this concept of a spiritual warfare. Because we are in a spiritual warfare. There is no doubt about that. We are experiencing that. And whether you want to look at it from the Christian aspect with the end of times, or you want to look at it from this Buddhist aspect, we are in a spiritual warfare that has been going on for a very long time. But I feel that the the pandemic and everything like that has really accelerated that to such a point that we're living in a time where we are seeing the behaviors and the vices and the extracurricular activities that people like to partake in used to be behind closed doors, but now it is made public and to be normalized and part of their personality, when in reality, this is just your fetish, and this has nothing to do with um, normalizing your identity or any of that nonsense. But what I'm trying to say is that this spiritual war that we're dealing with, the age of materialism, They go hand in hand. Cell phones, uh, droids, iPads, Xboxes, PlayStations, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Kick, Rumble, all of it, whatever it may be. Um, Many people are either using it for good or using it for bad. And some of these things are bad in general. I mean, there's nothing really good about cell phones. When we look into the cobalt and the things that are required to make our phones, the untold suffering that is needed, unfortunately, which is not the case, but they use to create our phones, to create the materialism that we in Western societies and in some Eastern societies hold dear to our hearts. And it's almost a, and I was kind of laughing about this because I think no matter, especially in Western societies, our taxes go to funding agenda driven Marxist programs in our own country, as well as funding the death and suffering at the hands of our uh, military imperialistic um, operations. It's unfortunate, but they have pretty much have put so much blood on all of the innocent Americans and even Western citizens. It's unethical. It's it's crazy. Uh, and I don't know how many people kind of think about it that way. Is to imagine the fact that some of your tax money just went to bombing a bunch of innocent people in the Middle East. It's crazy, and I think that, and the way they're able to fuel that is by getting us addicted to materialism, by getting us further disconnected spiritually, so that we don't associate those things with us, that we don't have any feeling for it, that it's out of sight, out of mind. And you have it on whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, both sides pretending as if they care for life, when in fact they're getting funded and getting donations from the corporate military complex and pharmaceutical complex as well. So, this is what I mean by this spiritual warfare. We have all these adversaries against us, implementing all these various operations and materialistic items to further disconnect us from our humanity, from our spirit, and from our soul. And this prophecy is no different than what you see in the biblical prophecies in Christianity. So this I don't know where this spiritual war is going to go. I don't know how it's going to end. But I am aware that if we as individuals do not unify together under, you know, like-minded morals and creeds and ethics, we're not going to be able to combat this war, this spiritual war. And we're not going to be able to um, discipline ourselves to the materialistic items that we have and that we're going to have to interact with. There's no way to get rid of them. I mean, you can, but it's to a point now where, they're so instrumental in our lives. And in many ways, as Elon Musk has said, we are cyborgs. We have these cell phones. As much as they are not physically a part of our body, they attach to our body. So we have so many things that are weighing down and restraining our soul, our humanity. And we need to overcome that as a collective. We need to be self aware of that. And it's going to be hard, but it's necessary if we wish to improve ourselves as individuals and, more importantly, as humans. Shambhala's hidden location and its merging with foreign beliefs. Apologies. apologies. Just want to check one thing. Okay. All right. The legendary story of Shambhala has appealed to a bizarre range of Westerners who have combined it with foreign myths and beliefs to create a mishmash of ideas which are often confused with the original. Over many centuries, numerous explorers and seekers of spiritual wisdom have embarked on the quest in search of the mystical paradise of Shambhala. Amongst the German Nazis, for example, certain high ranking officials have been remembered for their beliefs in the occult, which led them to send official expeditions to Tibet. Study Buddhism reported that some post war studies on Nazism made dubious claims that these expeditions were supposedly sent to find the Aryan forefathers in Shambhala and Agharti, hidden subterranean cities beneath the Himalayas. So let's learn more about these Nazis. All right. The Nazi Connection with Shambhala and Tibet by Dr. Alexander Berzin. Introduction. Many high-ranking members of the Nazi regime, including Hitler, but especially Himmler and Hess, held convoluted occult beliefs. Prompted by those beliefs, the Germans sent an official expedition to Tibet between 1938 and 1939 at the invitation of the Tibetan government to attend the Losar New Year celebrations. Tibet had suffered a long history of Chinese attempts to annex it and British failure to prevent the aggression or to protect Tibet. Under Stalin, the Soviet Union was severely persecuting Buddhism, specifically the Tibetan form as practiced among the Mongols within its borders and its satellite, the People's Republic of Mongolia, Outer Mongolia. In contrast, Japan was upholding Tibetan Buddhism in Inner Mongolia, which it had annexed as part of the Manchukuo, its puppet state in Manchuria. Claiming that Japan was Shambhala, the imperial government was trying to win the support of the Mongols under its rule for an invasion of Outer Mongolia and Serbia to create a pan-Mongol confederation under Japanese protection. The Tibetan government was exploring the possibility of also gaining protection from Japan in the face of an unstable situation. Japan and Germany had signed an anti-Comintern Pact in 1936, declaring their mutual hostility towards the spread of international communism. The invitation for the visit of an official delegation from Nazi Germany was extended in this context. In August 1939, shortly after the German expedition to Tibet, Hitler broke his pact with Japan and signed the Nazi-Soviet Pact. Interesting. In September, the Soviets defeated the Japanese who had invaded Outer Mongolia in May. Subsequently, nothing ever materialized from the Japanese and German contacts with the Tibetan government. Several post-war writers on the occult have asserted that Buddhism and the legend of Shambhala played a role in the German-Tibetan official contract. Let us examine the issue. The myths of Thule and Vil. The first element of Nazi occult beliefs in the mythic land of Hyperborea Thule. Just as Plato had cited the Egyptian legend of the sunken island of Atlantis, Herodotus mentioned the Egyptian legend of the continent of Hyboria, in the far north. When ice destroyed this ancient land, its people migrated south. Writing in 1679, the Swedish author Olof Rudbeck identified the Atlanteans with the Hyperboreans and located the latter at the North Pole. According to several accounts, Hyboria split into the islands of Thule and Ultima Thule, with some people identified with Iceland and Greenland. The second ingredient was the idea of a hollow earth. Oh, it's right up my alley. At the end of the 17th century, the British astronomer Sir Edmund Halley first suggested that the earth was hollow, consisting of four concentric spheres. The hollow earth theory fired many people's imaginations, especially with the publication of 1864 French novelist Jules Verne's Voyage to the Center of the Earth. Actually, he's not the first to suggest the earth was hollow. That's been an idea that's been permitted in ancient texts for many, many years, actually thousands of years, so he's not the first. Soon, the concept of vril appeared. In 1871, British novelist Edward Bulwer-Lytton, in The Coming Race, described a superior race, the vril ya, who lived beneath the earth and planned to conquer the world with vril, a psychokinetic energy. The French author Louis Jacquiet fathered the myth in Les Fils de Dieu, The Sons of God, 1873, and Les Traditions Indo-Européennes, the Indo-European traditions. That's me trying to sound all fancy and sexy. I hope you enjoyed it. In these books, he linked vril with the subterranean people of Thule. The Thulians will harness the power of vril to become supermen and rule the world. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, 1848 to 1900, also emphasized the concept of the Übermensch, Superman, and began his work, Der Antichrist, the Antichrist, 1888, with the line, "Let us see ourselves for what we are. We are Hyborians. We know well enough how we are living off that track." Quote. Although Nietzsche never mentioned vril, yet in his posthumous publication collection of aphorisms, Der Will zur Macht, the will to power, he emphasized the role of an internal force for superhuman development. He wrote that the herd, meaning common persons, strives for security within itself through creating morality and rules, whereas the supermen have an internal vital force that drives them to go beyond the herd. The force necessitates and drives them to lie to the herd in order to remain independent and free from the herd mentality. Interesting. Interesting. Now, what does that remind you of? That kind of sounds like what we're dealing with right now. It's almost as if Bill Gates and Oprah, all the elites and the corporate and Mitch McConnell and Biden and AOC and Victoria Nuland, Zelensky, all of these people, all these cruel and horrible people, they think they're the real. And they want to lie to us, which they have been doing for a very, very long time, in order to remain independent and free from the herd mentality. And that herd mentality, that could be, I don't know, the alphabet community, leftism, I don't know, the conservative movement. I don't know. Take your pick. Take your pick. But it is all used to keep us into this herd mentality. And fancy that. We are in a herd mentality in reverse. It's weird. Well, no, it's not really in reverse, but it's very interesting what they're saying here. And if you think about it, every single day they've been lying to us. They've been lying to us about everything. Take your pick. Take your pick in the last 3 years. What have they lied to you about? There are certain things I would love to say right now, but my channel is okay right now and they like me right now, so I ain't gonna say any of it. Even though some of it we're technically now allowed to say actually happened. But if you know what I mean, it rhymes with the word um erection. So it's just funny what they're saying here, and what Friedrich Nietzsche is saying. It's right here in front of you. They're using that. Look at the WEF. Look at Bilderberg. Look at any of these groups right here. They keep on bringing this necessity of DIE and equity and all this other BS. All right, that will lie to us. It lies to us in order to so that they can stay in power, remain independent and free to do whatever they want. Whether that's sacrificing children children or trafficking drugs or creating unethical and immoral laws, whatever it may be, or wars. But they keep us domesticated. They keep us in the herd. They keep us locked up with all sorts of nonsense to allow them to enact their malice and evil plans and intentions. Yeah, this is wild. And I guess you could say it in many ways with some of the plans that Bill Gates is talking about, or what they're doing in Saudi Arabia, building that wall. I mean, it's all them trying to build their version of Shambhala. That's really what we're looking at is them trying to build their own version. And this is what's so disgusting about these hidden groups and organizations. They desecrate ancient and beautiful symbols and use it for their own advantage to manipulate and disturb us. Whether it's the Nazi symbol, which has been around for thousands of years. It's been used in Japan. It's used in Buddhism. I mean, in Hinduism, it's actually a spiritual symbol. But I'm not here to get in trouble or anything. I condemn Nazism and I condemn the Nazi symbol. It's horrible, and the Holocaust is real. It happened, and I condemn anyone who does anything anti-Semitic or anything like that. Just to make sure we cross the T's and dot the I's. Oh man, I that was not that was probably the worst joke to say right at that moment, but I think you guys catch my drift. Trying to not get in trouble here, but it's just fascinating to me. All this information, it's right there in front of you, right in our faces. And shout out to Friedrich Nietzsche for giving us this little nugget. So let's continue. Enough of a Rōnin rant. In the Arctic home of the Vedas, the early advocate of Indian freedom, Ba Gandhar Tilak added a further touch by identifying the southern migration of the Thulians with the origin of the Aryan race. Thus, many Germans in the early 20th century believed that they were the descendants of Aryans who had from migrated south of Hyperborea, Thule, and who were destined to become the master race of supermen through the power of will. Hitler was among them. Now, I will be in the future. I will be doing a live stream covering the true Aryan race, and I can assure you, it is not from Germany. I digress. The Thule Society and the founding of the Nazi Party. Felix Neidner, the German translator of the Old Norse Eddas, founded the Thule Society in 1910. In 1918, Rudolf Feiner von Septendorf established its Munich branch. Septendorf had previously lived for several years in Istanbul, where in 1910 he had formed a secret society that combined esoteric Sufism and Freemasonry. It believed in the creed of the assassins, deriving from the Nazari sect of Ismaili Islam, which flourished during the Crusades. Wow. Okay. That well, huh? See, I don't even want to get into that right now. While in Istanbul, Sedov was also undoubtedly familiar with the Turian movement of the Young Turks started in 1908, which was largely behind the Armenian genocide of 1915 to 1916. Well, it's good to see that they're actually acknowledging that one. Turkey and Germany were allies during the First World War. Back in Germany, Septerdorf had also been a member of the German order, the Order of Teutons, founded in 1912 as a right wing society with a secret anti Semitic lodge. Though these channels, assassinations, genocide, and anti Semitism became parts of the Thule Society's creed, anti communism was added after the Bavarian Communist Revolution later in 1918, where the Munich Thule Society became the center of the counter-revolutionary movement. Man, there's so much stuff in this article alone that I'm going to research. Oh, I highly recommend you guys look into some of this stuff. In 1919, the society spawned a German Workers' Party. Starting later that year, Dietrich Eckart, a member of the inner circle of the Thule Society, initiated Hitler into the society and began to train him in its methods and for her. Uh, Hitler had been mystic minded from his youth when he had studied the occult and theosophy in Vienna later. Hitler decided Mein Kampf to Eckart. In 1920, Hitler became the head of the German Workers' Party, now renamed the National Socialist German Worker Party. Khrushchev, the Real Society, and Geopolitics. Another major influence on Hitler's thinking was Karl Hussberg, a German military advisor to the Japanese after the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. Because he was extremely impressed with the Japanese culture, many believe that he was responsible for the later German-Japanese alliance. He was also highly interested in Indian and Tibetan culture, learned Sanskrit, and claimed that he had visited Tibet. After serving as a general in the First World War, Husserl founded the Real Society in Berlin in 1918. It shared the same basic beliefs as the Thule Society and some say that it was its inner circle. The society sought to contact with supernatural beings beneath the earth to gain from them the powers of Vril. It also asserted a Central Asian origin of the Aryan race. Husserl developed the doctrine of geopolitics, and in the early 1920s, became the director of the Institute for Geopolitics at Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich. Geopolitics advocated conquering territory to gain more living space as a means of acquiring power. Rudolf Hess was one of Hauser's closest students and introduced him to Hitler in 1923. Do you think that's the founder of Hess Oil? I'm curious. While Hitler was in prison for his failed putsch, subsequently, Hauser often visited the future Fuhrer, teaching him geopolitics in association with the ideas of the Thule and the Vril Society. Thus, when Hitler became chancellor in 1933, he adopted geopolitics as his policy for the Aryan race to conquer Eastern Europe, Russia, and Central Asia. The key to success would be finding the forefathers of the Aryan race in Central Asia, the guardians of the secrets of the Vril. The swastika. The swastika is an ancient Indian symbol of immutable good luck. Swastika is an anglicization of the Sanskrit word of swastika, which means well-being or good luck. Used by Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains for thousands of years, it became widespread in Tibet as well. The swastika has also appeared in most other ancient cultures of the world. For example, the counterclockwise variant of it adopted by the Nazis is also the letter G in the medieval Northern European runic script. The Freemasons took the letter as an important symbol since G stands for God, the great architect of the universe or geometry. And that ties into quantum physics, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. The swastika is also a traditional symbol of the Old Norse god of thunder and might. Because of this, association with the god of thunder, and the Latvians and the Finnish both took the swastika as the insignia for their air forces when they gained independence after the First World War. In the late 19th century, Guido von List adopted the swastika as an emblem for the neo-pagan movement in Germany. The Germans did not use the Sanskrit word swastika, however, called it instead Hakenkreuz, meaning hooked cross. It would defeat and replace the cross, just as neo-paganism would defeat and replace Christianity. Sharing the anti-Christian sentiment of the neo-pagan movement, the Thule Society also adopted the Hakenkreuz as part of its emblem, placing it in a circle with a vertical German dagger superimposed on it. In 1920, at the suggestion of Dr. Friedrich Krun, the Thule Society, Hitler adopted the Hakenkreuz in his white circle for the central design of the Nazi Party flag. Hitler chose red for the background color to compete against the red flag of the rival Communist Party. The French researchers Louis Pauwels and Jacques Bergier in La Mente des Magicians, The Morning of the Magicians, 1962, wrote that Husserl convinced Hitler to use the Hakenkreuz as a symbol of the Nazi Party. They postulate that this was due to Husserl's interest in Indian and Tibetan culture. This conclusion is highly unlikely since Husserl did not meet Hitler until 1923, whereas the Nazi flag first appeared in 1920. It is more likely that Husserl used the widespread presence of the swastika in India and Tibet as evidence to convince Hitler of this region as a location of the forefathers of the Aryan race. Nazi suppression of rival occult groups. During the first half of the 1920s, a violent rivalry took place among the occult societies and secret lodges in Germany. In later years, Hitler continued the persecution of anthropolosophists, Theosophists and Freemasons and Rosicrucians. Various scholars ascribe this policy to Hitler's wish to eliminate any occult rivals to his rules. Well, that's kind of ironic, seeing as the Freemasons were funding the Nazi. Okay, I'm not going to get into it. Anyways, influenced by Nietzsche's writings and the Thule Society creeds, Hitler believed that Christianity was a defective religion, infected by its roots in Jewish thinking. He viewed its teachings of forgiveness, the triumph of the weak, and self abnegation as anti evolutionary and saw himself as a Messiah replacing God in Christ. Steiner had used the image of the Antichrist and Lucifer as future spiritual leaders who would reintegrate Christianity in a new, pure form. Hitler went much further. He saw himself as righting the world of a degenerate system and bringing about a new step in evolution with the Aryan master race. He could tolerate no rival Antichrist, either now or in the future. He was tolerant, however, of Buddhism. Plot twist? Really? Okay, we're getting some. This is getting very interesting. Buddhism in Nazi Germany. Okay. In 1924, Paul Dulk founded the Buddhistes House of Buddhists in Fruhan, Berlin. It was open to members of all Buddhist traditions, but primarily catered to the Theravada and Japanese forms, like Zen Buddhism, since they were the most widely known in the West at that time. In 1933, it hosted the first European Buddhist Congress. What? The Nazis allowed the House of Buddhists to remain open throughout the war, but tightly controlled it. As some members knew Chinese and Japanese, they acted as translators for the government in return for tolerance of Buddhism. Yo, Buddhism reigns supreme, y'all. Buddhism reigns supreme. Although the Nazi regime closed the Buddhist Society in Berlin, which had been active from 1936, and briefly arrested its founder Martin Steichen in 1941, they generally did not persecute Buddhists. After his release, Stein and several others continued to lecture on Buddhism in Berlin. There is no evidence, however, that teachers of Tibetan Buddhism were ever present in the Third Reich. Bless you, Pablo. Okay, you good? Bless you. Okay, yeah, he's good. Wow. The Nazi policy of tolerance for Buddhism does not prove any influence of Buddhist teachings on Hitler or Nazi ideology. A more probable explanation is Germany's wish to not damage relations with its Buddhist ally, Japan. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's so fascinating. Oh, that's fascinating. All right, the Ahnenber. Under the influence of Haushofer, Hitler authorized Friedrich Heisinger in 1935 to establish the Bureau for the Study of Ancestral Heritage, which Colonel Wolfram von Sirius as its head. Among other functions, Hitler charged it with researching Germanic runes and the origins of the swastika and locating the source of the Aryan race. Tibet was the most promising candidate. Alexander Cosmo de Koros, 1784 to 1842, was a Hungarian scholar obsessed with the quest to find the origins of the Hungarian people. Based on the linguistic affinities between Hungarian and the Turkic languages, he found that the origins of the Hungarian people were in the land of the Uyghurs in eastern Turkestan, Xinjiang, and Xinjiang. He believed that if he could reach Lhasa, he would find there the keys for locating his homeland. Hungarian, Finnish, and Turkic languages, Mongolian, Manchu belong to the Ural-Atlantic family of languages, also known as the Turian family, after the Persian word Turin for Turkestan. From 1909, the Turks had a pan-Turian movement spearheaded by a society known as the Young Turks. The Hungarian Turian Society soon followed in 1910, and the Turian Alliance of Hungary in 1920. Some scholars believe that the Japanese and the Korean languages also belong to the Turian family. Thus, the Turian National Alliance was founded in Japan in 1921, and the Japanese Turian Society in the early 1930s. Hausfer was undoubtedly aware of these movements, which sought the origins of the Turian race in Central Asia. It fit well with the Thule Society's search for the origins of the Aryan race there as well. His interest in Tibetan culture added weight to the candidacy of Tibet as a key to finding a common origin for the Aryan and Turian races and for gaining the power of will that its spiritual leaders possessed. Haushofer was not only influenced on the Anhember's interest in Tibet. Haushofer was a friend of Seven Haydn, the Swedish explorer who had led expeditions to Tibet in 1893, 1899 to 1902, and 1905 to 1908, and an expedition to Mongolia in 1927 to 1930. A favorite of the Nazis, Hitler invited him to give the opening address at the Berlin Olympics in 1936. Haydn engaged in pro-Nazi publishing activities in Sweden and made numerous diplomatic missions to Germany between 1939 and 1943. In 1937, Himmler made the Anheuser an official organization attached to the SS and appointed Professor Walther Huss chairman of the Sanskrit department of Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich as its new director. The Anheuser had a Tibetan Institute, which was renamed the Seven Haydn Institute for Inner-Asian und Expedition, Seven Hindu Institute of Inner Asia and Expeditions, in 1943. The Nazi expedition to Tibet. Ernest Schaffer, a German hunter and biologist, participated in two expeditions to Tibet in 1931 and 1932, 1934 and 1936 for sport and zoology research. The Anheuser sponsored him to lead a third expedition in 1938 to 1939 at the official invitation of the Tibetan government. The visit coincided with renewed Tibetan contacts with Japan. A possible explanation for the invitation is that Tibetan government wished to maintain cordial relations with the Japanese and their German allies as a balance against the British and Chinese. Thus, the Tibetan government welcomed the German expedition at the 1939 New Year celebration in Lhasa. Okay, in Festivals of the White Gods Scavers, a research expedition through Tibet to Lhasa, the holy city of the god realm, in 1950, Ernest Schaffer described his experiences during the expedition. During the festives, he reported that the Nongchong oracle warned that although the Germans brought sweet presents and words, Tibet must be careful. Germany's leader is like a dragon. Sarsrong, the pro-Japanese former head of the Tibetan military, tried to soften the prediction. He said that the regent had heard much more from the oracle, but he himself was unauthorized to divulge the details. The regent prays daily for no war between the British and the Germans, since this would have terrible consequences for Tibet as well. Both countries must understand that all good people must pray the same. During the rest of his stay in Lhasa, Shifra met often with the regent and had a good rapport. Yeah, we know how the state of Tibet has been since. It's interesting. The Germans were highly interested in establishing friendly relations with Tibet. Their agenda, however, was slightly different from that of the Tibetans. One of the members of the Safar expedition was the anthropologist Bruno Berger, who was responsible for racial research. Having worked with HFK Gunther on the northern race among the Indo-Germans of Asia, Berger subscribed to Gunther's theory of the northern race in Central Asia and Tibet. In 1937, he had proposed to research a research project for eastern Tibet, and with Shaffer expedition planned to investigate scientifically the racial characteristics of the Tibetan people. While in Tibet and skimming on the way, Berger measured the skulls of 300 Tibetans and Skimmese and examined some of their other physical features and bodily marks. He concluded that the Tibetans occupied an intermediary position between the Mongol and European races, with the European racial element showing itself most predominantly among the aristocracy. How convenient. And I don't know if that's really true or if this Nazi is talking out his ass. Probably talking out of his ass. According to Richard Grieve, Tibetan research in the SS uh, and passion for life and xenophobia. Passion for life and xenophobia. I'm gonna go get myself something to drink and I'm gonna laugh on that on my way back. Give me 1 second. I'm back. Passion for life and xenophobia. Anthology in the Third Reich. Good Lord. 1995, Berger recommended that Tibetans could play. Oh, well, this book was written in 1995. Okay, Berger recommended that Tibetans could play an important role after the final victory of the Third Reich. They could serve as an allied race in Pan-Mongol Confederation under the guise of Germany and Japan. Although Berger also recommended further studies to measure all of the Tibetans, no further expeditions to Tibet were undertaken. Oh boy. Okay, purported occult expeditions to Tibet. Several post war studies on Nazism and the occult, such as Trevor Ravencroft in The Spear of Destiny, that's a real person, have asserted that under the influence of Hassifer and the Thule Society, Germany sent annual expeditions to Tibet from 1926 to 1943. Their mission was first to find and then maintain contact with the Aryan forefathers in Shambhala and Agartha, hidden subterranean cities beneath the Himalayas. Adepts there were the guardians of a secret occult powers, especially Vril. The mission sought their aid in harnessing those powers for creating an Aryan master race. According to these accounts, Shambhala refused any assistance, but Agarty agreed. Subsequently, from 1929, groups of Tibetans purportedly came to Germany and started lodges known as the Society of Green Men. In connection with the Green Dragon Society in Japan, through the intermediary of Husfer, they subsequently helped the Nazis' cause with their occult powers. Himmler was attracted to these groups of Tibetan Agartya adepts and purportedly from their influence established the Anerben in 1935. Aside from the fact that Himmler did not establish the Anerben but rather incorporated into the SS in 1937, Ravencroft's accounts contain other dubious assertions. The main one is the purported Agati support for Nazi cause. In 1922, the Polish scientist Ferdinand Osendarski published Beasts, Men, and Gods, describing his travels through Mongolia. In it, he related hearing of the subterranean land of Agarty beneath the Gobi Desert. In the future, its powerful inhabitants would come to the surface to save the world from disaster. The German translation of Ossendorowski's book, Tieren, Meschen, and Gorder, appeared in 1923 and became quite popular. Stephen Hayden, however, published in 1925 Ossendrowski and the Truth, in which he debunked the Polish scientist's claims. He pointed out that Ossendrowski had lifted the idea of Agarthy from Saint Verdas Alverdi's 1886 novel Mission of India in Europe, to make his story more appealing to the German public. Since Haydn had a strong influence on the Ahnenerben, it is unlikely that this bureau would have sent an expedition specifically to find Shambhala and Agarthy, and subsequently would have received assistance from the latter. Well, that was a fascinating, absolutely fascinating little story right there. Like, that was awesome. So we can, be rest assured to know that the that Buddhists were not engaging in Nazi practices, but this is all still very fascinating stuff. And it kind of reminds me of this movie with oh god, I can't remember his name, but Chow Yun Fat is in it, and it's called Bulletproof Monk. And I swear to you, they deal with Shambhala and like the Fountain of Youth. It's really interesting. It's a cool movie. But regardless of that, this is absolutely fascinating. If you enjoyed that article, please hit the like button. Let me know you are enjoying what we're reading so far. Man, that was incredible. Oof, fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Now let's wrap this article up. Let's wrap it up, and then we're gonna hit up one last thing in this article that I forgot to look at. Okay, so yep, we read that part. All right. While many have reported being there, no one has yet provided any evidence of its existence or been able to pinpoint its physical location on a map. Most references, however, place Shambhala in the mountainous regions of Eurasia. Ancient Zhangzong texts identify Shambhala as the Sute Valley in Punjab or Himachal Pradesh, India. Mongolians identify Shambhala with certain valleys of southern Siberia. In Altai folklore, Mount Belka is believed to be the gateway to Shambhala. Meanwhile, modern Buddhist scholars seem to conclude that Shambhala is located in the higher reaches of the Himalayas in what is now called the Duldar Mountains around uh, Macleogen. Some legends say that the entrance to Shambhala is hidden inside a remote, abandoned monastery in Tibet, and and guarded by beings known as the Shambhala Guardians. For some, the fact that Shambhala has never been found has a very simple explanation. Many believe that Shambhala lies on the very edge of physical reality, as a bridge connecting this world to one beyond it. While many disregard Shambhala as a fanciful subject of myth and legend, for others, a belief in Shambhala stirs an inner yearning for to one day find this utopian kingdom. And as I was saying earlier, this kingdom is somewhere that is probably on the edge of our physical plane, in a world that we are able to tap into using other means. And I was saying earlier in the article, through karmic means of having good karma. And I wanted to end off on that, and because that was what was really instrumental about being able to access Shambhala, is having good karma. Okay. Now this was updated November 29th, 2021. India's Vedic Sanskrit Upanishads Foundation of Religions and Karma. The Upanishads are a genre of texts that form the final and last sections of the Vedas. The Upanishads were composed orally in Sanskrit, and the earliest surviving ones dating to the first millennium BC. The number of Upanishads varies, though according to tradition there were over 200 in total. Muktika canon, on the other hand, provides a list of 108 Upanishads. What is it? Upanishads? Upanishads? I'm sorry. I know I'm butchering it. I apologize. In any case, there are 11, sometimes 13 major Upanishads, and these are the most important ones. The Upanishads deal mainly with philosophical and religious themes, including the concept of karma. They are as significant as the foundation of Hinduism, as as well as later philosophies and religions in India, including Jainism and Buddhism. So here we have Vyasa, a sage who, according to tradition, composed the Upanishads. Upanishads? I gotta figure out the better way to pronounce that. The root meaning of Upanishads. According to one interpretation, the word Upanishad is derived from the Sanskrit root word sad and two prefixes upa and ni. These three parts of the word are translated as to sit, nearest, and totally, respectively. Therefore, Upanishad, okay, there we go, Upanishad, may be translated to mean sitting nearby devotedly. From this etymology of the word, it is assumed that this refers to students sitting near their teacher when being instructed. Another interpretation, however, suggests that the word Upanishad meant connection or equivalence, and that it referred to the homology between aspects of the human individual and celestial entities or forces. Yet another interpretation of the word is derived from a commentary of Shankara, an 18th century AD Indian philosopher and theologian. Shankara derived the word from the root sad, meaning to destroy, loosen, thereby associating it with the destruction of ignorance. And here, here's what's interesting about it: the destruction of ignorance, the death of the ego, having good karma. This is something I don't think the Nazis really realized, is that they didn't really have good karma. And I think that was what the oracle was kind of inferring when explaining that, Hitler was a dragon. And, most dragons often get destroyed. They get killed by a knight. And this knight happened to be the Russian Red Army. Well, I think, this whole idea of karma, and I think, what the Nazis were trying to do, it almost seems like they were trying to control karma and to generate good karma in the guise of thinking that they were descendants of this superhuman race. So it's just interesting. And the karma came back to bite them in the ass, that's for sure. All right. The earliest Upanishads are believed to have been composed during the first millennium BC, though they cannot be dated with precision. According to one division, the major Upanishads, which are associated with the Vedas, hence known as the Vedic Upanishads, may be divided into two chronological periods. During the first period, which lasted from 700 to 500 BC, the Yaka and the Chadoyaka, the Taittiriya and the Aitira and Kwasikai were composed. These texts were composed prior to the emergence of the so-called heterodox schools of Indian philosophy, i.e. the Buddhists, Jains, and the Jivkas. The second period, which lasted from 300 to 100 BC, saw the composition of the Kena, the Ketha, the Tassa, the Svestara, the Prasna, the Mundaka, the Mandukya, and the Maitiri. I am sorry I butchered the pronunciations. I'm trying. The Upanishads, oh my gosh, my tongue is about to strangle itself. The Upanishads continued to be composed over the centuries, even after the arrival of Islam in the Indian subcontinent. Moreover, newer Upanishads are said to have been composed during the early modern and modern eras. These are referred to as the new Upanishads, which, unlike the older ones, do not usually deal with themes associated with the Vedas. Another difference between the older and newer Upanishads, that word's going to kill me, is that the former were generally composed in prose, whereas the later ones tended to be composed in metrical form. Nevertheless, it has been pointed out that even in individual texts, different compositional styles can be identified. In addition to the composition of the Upanishads, numerous commentaries and sub-commentaries of this genre of texts were produced. Now here we have a picture of the late Vedic period of India. The Upanishads, like the Bible, written by various authors. As the Upanishads were composed over an extended period of time, it follows naturally that they were written by various authors. The identity of these authors, however, is unknown. Nevertheless, some of the important doctrines contained in these texts can be traced to such renowned Indian sages as Rōnin Yajalakai, I'm sorry, Balakai, Seven Tuki, and Sandila. The Upanishads are regarded as part of the Shruti, the revered literature. This means that they were believed to have been uttered by sages in the fullness of the illuminated understanding of truth. It is thought that the Upanishads were first composed and transmitted orally. It is only at a much later time that these compositions were written down and transformed into texts. In terms of number, it is traditionally thought that the Upanishads contained over 200 texts. Some authors claim that they were up to 900 Upanishads. If this were true, then it would be safe to say that most of these texts are now lost. The Muktai, meaning deliverance, canon provides a list of 108 Upanishads. The 108 Upanishads are listed during the dialogue between Rama, the seventh avatar of Vishnu, and one of his devotees, the monkey god Hanuman. During the dialogue, Rama proposes teaching Hanuman the Vedanta, meaning the culmination conclusion of the Vedas, which consists of the Upanishads and the Aranyakas. After Rama proclaimed that even by reading one verse of them with devotion, one gets the status of union with me, hard to get even by sages. Hanuman inquires about the different types of deliverance. Mukti, hence the name of the canon, to which Raman replies that the only real type of liberation is Kailiva. Subsequently, Raman introduces the 108 Upanishads. As the end of the Vedas and the Upanishads came last, as mentioned earlier, the Upanishads from the last part of the Vedas and hence are referred to as the Vedanta. The word Veda may be translated to mean knowledge. The Vedas are thought to have composed during the second millennium BC and are considered to be the oldest scriptural text in Hinduism. Additionally, the Vedas are the oldest spiritual text of any religion that is still being practiced. And, it'd be foolish to think that the Thule society under Hitler was not studying the Vedas as well, studying this information, and maybe trying in many ways to control karma. That's kind of what the elites do right now, is that they control karma by manufacturing consent for many of these horrible, events, whether they're mass shootings, any of these things. A lot of them are used to offshoot that karma that would be instilled on them to be instilled upon us. Hitler wasn't very keen to that idea, it seems. The Vedas were composed in archaic Sanskrit and transmitted orally before being committed in written form. There are 4 Vedic texts: the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajur Veda, and the Athra Veda. Check out my my Hindu text and quantum physics live stream where I discuss those texts. Each of the Vedas is divided into 4 parts: the Samhita, the Brahman, the Aranyaka, and the Upanishad. The first consists of a collection of hymns or sacred formulas. The second is a liturgical prose exposition, and the last 2 are appendices of the Brahman. The word Aranyaka translates to mean book of the wilderness and contains esoteric doctrines. These doctrines are supposed to be studied by initiates in remote places, for example, forests, hence its name. The Upanishads, on the other hand, contain speculations on the ontological connection between human beings and the cosmos. Although the Upanishads are composed in a ritual context, they are also said to mark the beginning of the resonant inquiry into a number of perennial philosophical questions. Indeed, Western scholars have dubbed the Upanishads as the first philosophical treatise of the Indian subcontinent. Some have argued, however, that the Upanishads do not actually approach philosophical reflections in a systematic manner. In addition, the texts do not present a unified doctrine. Furthermore, philosophical methods were not normally used in investigation of philosophical questions. For instance, ideas may be presented as truths or insights known to certain sages, instead of logical propositions that may be independently verified. The key concepts of Brahman and Atman. The lack of coherent and unified doctrine that disqualifies the Upanishads as philosophy is due largely to the fact that the texts are composite and fragmented in nature. It has been pointed out that the texts were composed by different scholars of thoughts, which were often in competition with one another. This would explain the diversity of teachings found within the texts. Nevertheless, where a text or group of texts are ascribed to a particular school, a degree of coherence can be observed. Apart from that, there are also certain themes, mutual interests, or philosophical questions that are explored in the Upanishads by the different schools, and it is here that the overlaps may be seen. One of the significant ideas explored is the idea of Brahman and Atman. These two concepts would subsequently become key terms in the Indian philosophy, and some of the earliest discussions about them are found in the Upanishads. Brahman refers to the ultimate, unchangeable reality, whilst Atman refers to self. In other words, the former is the essence of the universe, and the latter the essence of man. According to the Upanishads, Brahman resides in Atman, and the former can only be known through the latter. The concept of Brahman and Atman is considered by many later Indian religious and philosophical schools of thought as the core teachings of the Upanishads. In addition, it has been asserted that this teaching and the Upanishads, by extension, represent a revival of spiritualism in reaction to the complicated ritualism, ceremonialism, and formalism of the Brahmins. The concept of Brahman and Atman has been interpreted to mean that God is pleased by spiritual worship rather than external rituals and ceremonies, and the perfect is inward and spiritual rather than outward and mechanical. And that kind of makes sense. You look at various, whether it's like certain, the mega churches, it's all about the ceremony, it's all about the ritual, the flashing lights. It's not about being one with God, being with your spirituality. So I totally feel and vibe with that. The Upanishads also contain some of the earliest discussions related to karma, another key idea in Indian thought. The word karma literally means action, though it has been developed into the principle of cause and effect, which people may be more familiar with today. Within the context of the Upanishads, karma is associated primarily with the performance of rituals. In general, any ritual action that is performed correctly is believed to yield positive results, good karma. Conversely, ritual action that is performed incorrectly will yield negative results, bad karma. All right, and here we have a picture of karma as an action and reaction. If we show goodness, we will reap goodness. And to me, I would say that this ties in with the kingdom of Shambhala, because in order to enter Shambhala, you need good karma. Your karma needs to be in line with the tenets of the kingdom, with the tenets of humanity, the tenets of Buddhism and life. And in my eyes, it's obvious that the Nazis were not in line, and hence the reason of their collapse, and among other things, and also the fact that they were looking in the wrong place. But that's a whole nother thing. The Upanishads also speak of the beginnings of karma. Whilst the notion of karma being the principle of cause and effect is not stated explicitly in the Upanishads, there are some teachings in the text that may be regarded as its precursor. For instance, in one text, the sage Janjavalakya, I'm sorry, I am so sorry, was asked about the fate of a person after death. The sage replied that a person becomes where was it? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, asked about the fate of a person after death. The sage replied that a person becomes good by performing good actions and becomes bad by performing bad actions. One of Yalavarki's essential assumptions is that present actions have consequences in the future, and that our present circumstances have been shaped by our past actions. But this ancient sage does not indicate that the future is set in stone, and that people can create good consequences in the future by doing good in the present. In other words, uh, um, Valkaya's teachings of karma does not present a fatalistic doctrine in which the future is predetermined, but as a concept to encourage good deeds. And I think you could almost say that with the Nazis, they thought they were doing good deeds, and that's what I find very interesting about all of this is the whole notion of karma, and they were so hell bent on finding this place, but they didn't even have the karma to even actualize it. A belief connected with karma is that of rebirth or reincarnation. Although Valkya recognized that karma takes place over multiple lifetimes, he does not explore the issue of rebirth in relation to karma. The relationship between these two concepts, however, is looked at in more detail elsewhere in the Upanishads. For instance, in one of the Upanishads, Pravahana Jaivali, a philosopher king, uses naturalistic philosophy to describe the link between karma and rebirth. In another Upanishad, the same king expounds on the teaching of the five fires, whereby human life is depicted as a cycle of regeneration, and that the essence of life, the fire, takes on different forms as it passes through the various phases of existence. The five fires can be described as follows. Quote, when humans die, they are cremated and travel in the form of smoke to the other world, the first fire, where they become soma. As soma, they enter a rain cloud, the second fire, and become rain. As rain, they return to earth, the third fire, where they become food. As food, they enter man, the fourth fire, where they become semen. As semen, they enter a woman, the fifth fire, and become an embryo. End quote. The king adds that those who lived good lives will enter into a pleasant womb, that of members of the higher castes, whereas those who lived bad lives will enter into the wombs of animals or outcasts, thus alluding to karma as a principle of cause and effect. The cycle of birth, life, and death, and rebirth is referred to as samsara, another concept mentioned in the Upanishads. Samsara affects all living things, including the gods, and therefore is a fundamental aspect of existence. Nevertheless, it is also believed that it is possible to escape this form of cycle and achieve moksha, or liberation. Although this concept would later become an important aspect of Indian thought, it was also explained explicitly in the Upanishads. In fact, in these texts, especially the earlier ones, Life is depicted as pleasant and desirable, and not a condition from which human beings need to liberate themselves. It is without doubt that the Upanishads were extremely influential in the development of subsequent Indian philosophical and religious thought. The concepts first mentioned in these texts would later be expanded on and developed by later thinkers into the form that we are more familiar with today. Lastly, it may be said that the Upanishads provide a means of gaining some insight into Indian culture and history, considering the great influence these texts have on later philosophical and religious thought. Now, if you're aware that um, Hitler, he was going all over the place trying to find various types of ancient iconography, texts, you know, anything to aid in creating his superhuman Aryan race. And I think what's interesting about karma is that I don't know if he and his, occult groups were as familiar with karma as the other groups, specifically like the Freemasons. But, I feel that we can also kind of take into consideration the fact that these, the idea of karma, the idea of karma is very important for us to understand in relation to this kingdom. And I think even with this kingdom, it's kind of similar to, heaven, going to this place where you need to have good karma. But it seems like in relation to the kingdom of Shambhala, this is more of a plane of existence that's kind of outside of heaven. It's almost as if we're looking at another level to heaven. And I don't know what level that is. I don't know if it's above or below. But it's just something to think about. Um, that in order to enter such a place of pure elation and knowledge and fortitude, you must have, a well balanced and integral karma. And we are living in a time where they are actively doing whatever they can to destroy our karma. And that is in the guise of the ideological desire for materialistic things. It's right there in front of us, and the powers to be have a better grasp of how to use that karma against us. The Nazis weren't aware of that, and partly it's because they were being used by Wall Street and the Bank of London and other groups, but we're not going to get into that. That's not for this episode. Maybe in the future when I have more information about that to provide. But I'm going to try one last thing, a video from a Buddhist and his thoughts on Shambhala. Now I'm going to see if my audio will work this time. I, I hope so. Let's see. Start it up. Well, still can't get the audio to work. But for my people watching the live stream, you can pretty much see the subtitles. Well, now he's saying here, I'm gonna actually scroll back real quick for my podcast listeners. He says here it's that it's located behind Mount Tais or Mount Kalilash. This is clear in his book, but if we ask where it is actually located and say that it is somewhere in Russia, we cannot point a finger and say, we go around the world in an airplane. Even if we can't see it, I don't think we can say it doesn't exist merely because we can't locate it. We can't say there is no such place merely because we can't find it. Let me tell you a story. I was born in Tir district of Kham, but I had many classmates and teachers who have lived there in Tir district. And here there are a local deity known as Akudrala. There are two mounds facing each other. And when you look across one mound to the other, people say, oh, today Akudrala has set up tents. And it looks like a local deity has set up hundreds of tents. The people call him Akudrala's erected tents. Because these are the objects that can be reached, people descend and hike over to see the tents. But when they arrive, there's not a single tent, just empty space. When you look back across and see hundreds of clearly visible multicolored tents. But somehow there's visible objects don't exist when you go back there. Thus, there are some things in the environment that can be sensed by gross cognition of our five human senses. And some things that are subtle lands that cannot be sensed by the five gross human senses but still exist in places in this world. They can be spoken about in terms of this account. There is an ample number of things like this story, so Shambhala is definitely a place like that, which can only be sensed by what is subtle and pure than these five senses. Subtler and pure than these five senses. I'm confident of that. Let me talk about two strange things. In Lakta, there is a place called Chogmasa. Some say that Chogmasa is copiated, and Chogmasa literally means, hold on, sorry. He's speaking quick now. In Lakta, there is a place called Cholamas. Some say that Choglamas is a corrupted name, and it should be Changlamas, literally the place where the pathway to the north. They say that it is called the pathway damn, bro, you're too quick. They say that it is called the pathway passage leading to Shambhala in the north. So there are people who say this, and I also think that it makes sense. Then, once I intentionally went to Orissa, now called Odivisha, which is near Calcutta. It's possible that the Chilu Pandita, the great master of Kalachakra, might have lived in Odivisha. The teachings of Kalachakra have flourished greatly in Odivisha. So the place where the Kalachakra teachings flourished was Odivisha, or Orissa as it was known. So, thinking there might be some indications of Kalachakra like rock paintings that could be seen, I went there. There are the ruins of the three hill temples there, Ratnagiri, Lalitiri, and Udayagiri. The ruins of Ratnagiri are the most extensive, so I went there, and one person explained to me that around this area is the city of Sambulapar. He said that Sambulapar is Shambhalapar. In other words, that Shambhalapar is Shambhala. I thought this also made sense. As for what we have, wait, hold on. As for what we have in our historical accounts, it is said that Chilu Pandita went to Shambhala to listen to the teachings from the Kalki holder of the castes. There are two lineages here, the Ra lineage and the Dro lineage. This seems to be according to the Dro lineage. According to the lineage of Dro Lotsawa, Chilu Padita went all the way to Shambhala. There he listened to the teachings from the Kalkai of Shambhala himself. According to the Ra lineage, he didn't need to go all the way to Shambhala. When he reached one of its borders, an emanation of Kalkai holder of the castes came and said, if you absolutely must listen to the ritual predecessors of Kalachara, it would be all right to do that right here. So there was no need for him to go to Shambhala. He listened to the teachings from the emanation of the Kalki itself. These accounts are in our text. So I think it makes sense that it was this place called Sambalbur. And there you have it. The most like origin of Shambhala. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. This was a great stream. Some great knowledge. I really enjoyed that. And I'm definitely going to go back to that Nazi article and look up some of the information in there because there's some very fascinating historical figures and even some texts that I might want to take a peek at and look at. But yeah, that article, I might have to revisit that one again. That was really good. A lot of really interesting information. I hope everyone really enjoyed it. We're living in some interesting times, and it's getting weird out there. It's getting very weird out there. But what's also fascinating about this story, and we learned a little bit about the origins of this place. We learned a little bit about karma. We learned a little bit about the Nazis' origin and some of their symbolism. So I think for a lot of us out there, it's important that we are mindful of how much we really just don't understand. And one thing that I found fascinating about all of this was that as I'm reading all this, I'm connecting a lot of it to quantum physics and the quantum realm and the many worlds that inhabit it. So I really implore everyone out there to like really take that time and explore these fantastical ideas and readings and interpretations and ideologies. Because I think for a lot of us out there, when we learn some of the origins of karma and we learn some of these things, it becomes more easy for us to digest other forms of information that may conflict and challenge our foundational belief system. And that's what I'm here for. And I think what we learned today is just that, um, this city may as well have existed, but the the deeper knowledge that would be provided in this city is something that's eternal, something that's from within. And if you caught my Edgar Casey live streams and my Hindu and quantum physics, you understand that a lot of this stuff really taps into the conscious realm, the conscious ethereal world. And, many of us out there are privy to that capability. It used to be all of us in our totality, but there were certain entities and beings that had ulterior plans for us. So here we are. But I really highly recommend people do some deep dives into some of this stuff and research these things yourself, because you'll be surprised at how much of this, excuse me, is really based in a level of reality. And you can diss on religion all you want, but I'm telling you, the more I learn about different religions and historical texts and the consistencies and the similarities in stories, the more and more I am of the notion that, biblical texts, Islamic texts, all of it, there is truth to it. And we can learn about our past and our history from those texts. So I highly recommend everyone out there get out there and challenge your foundational belief system. It is healthy in our improvements of our individuality and our humanity. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lounge Rōnin. All things, everything. If you made it this far and you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe and ring that notification bell. And shout out to my Rumble subscribers and viewers. I appreciate you guys. Shout out to my YouTube viewers and shout out to my Twitch viewers. I appreciate all of you guys. And until next time, stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much love.